Lewis, right here.
Louis Frank Reuters. Good morning, Mike. This is about fan expectation and experience. You know, it's not analogous to Indy's tire issues, but when fans get disappointed, you know, we've seen a drop-off of attendance at Indy, may or may not be related to the tire issues of a couple of years back. How much influence does NASCAR have on the tracks to make sure that the fans are satisfied, whether it be a refund or other tickets or something like that, to make sure the fans keep coming back?
Well, I think we all, when I say we all, I'm talking about tracks and teams and NASCAR proper. We all work together in a unified goal of delivering a very appealing product for fans. And the on occasion you have interruptions to that. And I think the interruptions are all unique as to what impact they may have, but I know that we all work on a common goal of making the experience for race fans and the appealing part of what we do to race fans paramount. And along the way we have hiccups, but then we need to collectively get together and figure it out so that we can press on.
Okay, our next question from Mike Mulhern. We'll come back over to Dustin and Seth.
Mike Muller, MikeMuller.net. This is a political issue in Kentucky, too. Have you talked to the governor or any politicians called you up and said, what in the world? Because it's a black eye on Kentucky as well as NASCAR.
I've not had any conversation with any public officials since the Saturday afternoon.
Okay, next question from Dustin.
Dustin Long, Landmark Newspapers. Mike, here in the coming days, there are a couple drivers who are going to be in court. Kyle Busch over a speeding situation and Michael Annett over his situation in February. I know with Kyle that NASCAR didn't do anything, and with Michael, you set aside, put him on probation, set aside going to a certified, evaluated by a certified substance abuse professional. Based on what happens moving forward and when those cases are closed, is NASCAR looking at, or would NASCAR look at any additional penalties, or does NASCAR see, from its point of view, these cases closed in its mind?
I would say that we'll have to watch and see how things unfold and see if it does translate into what we do. But I'd also remind everybody, I think it's important from NASCAR or for NASCAR to recognize its authority as a sports sanctioning body, and we're not a local or state vehicular regulatory body. We're a sports league sanctioning body. Now, I'm not saying that those two wouldn't ever overlap, but I think what we try to do is be very respectful of the fact that our realm is regulating and our realm of responsibility is regulating NASCAR as a sport, and then letting the proper jurisdictions regulate anything outside that sport. On occasion they overlap, but it's rare. But on occasion they could overlap, and then that's when we have to consider what we would do.
I'm sorry, here's just a follow-up. The NFL certainly has done some things like that where they've taken a look at off-field activities and penalized guys. And I think some people would have the question if that's opening things up for sports to do or organizations to do things like that. Because it's an independent contractor situation, in essence, does that make it different for NASCAR? I think some people would have the question, they would see the NFL starting to do this. Why doesn't NASCAR maybe step in a little bit more on some stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so, but then let me see if this answers that. I think every sporting body, from amateur, professional, Olympics, whatever, has to look at its own set of circumstances, its own particulars, and react accordingly. There is a difference between us and football, basketball, and baseball, where the league and the participants in the league are very closely knitted together with different contractual relationships, and where we're very independent of each our stakeholders are very independent, and that has to be considered in the final decision. But I think each league has to look at its actions and its reactions and try to decide which ones are the most proper ones to take.
Okay, Seth?
Seth Livingstone, USA Today. Back to Kentucky for a second. obviously there were problems with the traffic and parking. What kind of public transportation options were there, and what do you think might be the future of public transportation for that venue?
I couldn't sit here and tell you today exactly what was available for that venue. I think some of that will come out as we ask questions of the facility. As to what might be available going forward, our reliance is on the track to figure those things out, because they're the host of the event, and if that's part of the answer, then I suspect that we'll figure that out. But I couldn't sit here today and tell you what was available or what might be available.
Okay, our next question is from Jim Utter.
Jim Utter, Shell Observer. Mike, you have, I believe, one other event at Kentucky coming up later this fall, I think it is, along with the Indy truck race with the IndyCar. Will you guys be paying any special attention? I don't know if it's even comparable to the Cup race, but are there things that you think they may implement or test perhaps that weekend that you'll be keeping an eye on?
I think it's a good opportunity to try stuff.
Next question from Bob Pockers.
Bob Pockers, SingDaily.com. I was curious how you feel like the boys have at it policy has been going in the first half of the season. It seemed after the Harvick Busch episode, there were lots of drivers with questions about what's okay and what's not. I was curious if you clarified a lot of that with the drivers and how you think the policy is going in general.
Well, I think the policy is being probably defined every time something happens, and the community sees our reaction to it. So it's a never-ending process of defining what all that means. But I think the intent a couple of years ago, or actually 3 years ago, was to tell the competitors that we were going to give back more of the what they do, particularly on the racetrack, back in their hands, with limits obviously to it. But and I think a lot of that comes from us, doing our own internal look and maybe feeling like we were too regulatory on some areas. We still have a responsibility to maintain law and order, and we take that very serious. But in the meantime, I think what's happened over the course of the last couple of years is every time something happens and we react to it, it defines a little bit more of what we meant by them having more responsibility. And that will go on. But the other thing that I'd like to mention, though, is over the course of the history of NASCAR, we've seen cycles of almost every type of topic you can imagine. But when it comes to the conflicts on the racetrack, every weekend there's 42 guys that want to beat the other 42 guys, and so that's an inherent rivalry in our sport. When it becomes maybe more personal between a couple of them, we watch that and we let it play itself out. We don't necessarily encourage it, but what we do encourage is them being race car drivers on the racetrack and not worrying about looking over their shoulder at us. And that's the environment that I think we were after when we talked about this, and I think that's the environment we've got right now.
Okay, our final two questions will come from Mike Vega and Claire B.
Mike, good morning. Just to follow up on that theme, to what extent does NASCAR try to regulate rivalries in the sport? I mean, you've seen things that kind of spilled over from the track on, into the garage area, but to what extent do you feel like that needs regulation?
Well, I think our actions answer that question when something goes beyond what happens on the racetrack, whether it's on pit road or in a truck garage area. And then our reactions to those, I think, speak for themselves. Again, I reiterate that what we're after is to encourage the drivers to be drivers on the racetrack and let their own character prevail, while at the same time understanding our responsibility to maintain a reasonable law and order in the environment around the racetrack. And I think our actions kind of answer that, I hope.
Okay, our final question from Claire.
Claire B. Lang, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Mike, there's been some sense amongst the national media, maybe some of the fans at NASCAR is picking up steam, in ratings and in a lot of areas. How much does the glitch at Kentucky affect that? Just when everything was starting to roll kind of in a positive direction, how much impact do you think?
Well, I'd like to think that we overcome the glitch in Kentucky, and that what happened on the racetrack in Kentucky, the teams and the drivers delivered on their end, and they will this weekend, and so we go on, and we certainly are take what happened on the highways trying to get into Kentucky as a very serious issue that we intend to correct. But I think what's happening on the racetrack helps us maintain that momentum that you speak of.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. We will begin our NASCAR driver media availability with Kevin Harvick here in just a few minutes. Thank you.